Ah, dystopias, the genre of Brave New World in 1984, and the genre of Divergent and The Program. At its best, dystopia is an exploration of the darkest excesses of humanity and what can result when bread in circuses distract and subdue a population long enough for those who want to take both bread and circus away to achieve power. They can explore philosophical, technological, and political themes perhaps better than any other genre, for only through such fictional examples can the full extent of one's thoughts and worries for the world's future be expressed in a setting, be it through the cybernetic forever war of Terminator or in the often cloned Big Brother speeches. But all of these pale in comparison to the importance of using a dystopia to push my own naked agenda based on an extremely limited perspective on an unsuspecting audience. Or just to write another underdog story because we can never have enough of those. But we need to set a foundation first, and that is, what is our dystopia, actually? Dystopia is a massively broad topic, and there are so many facets of life you could adjust, even just slightly, to create a dystopic result. Just think of something fundamental to one's enjoyment or continuation of life, and then give it a quota or a restriction, and you can find an interesting way to write a dystopia. Fahrenheit 451 could be conceived of as a book quota, for example, but there are all sorts of other ones. Population quotas, water quotas, etc. But the problem is that all of those possibilities make my head hurt and distract from what we're really doing here. So I think our dystopic government is going to be fascistic. Getting brave today, I know. As we're all aware, the Nazis were the literal only bad government to ever exist, and all other ones have been either good or would be boring as a dystopia. I mean, imagine writing a dystopia run by a madman like Pol Pot, trading the cold, calculating aesthetic of most dystopias for something much more manic. Couldn't think of anything more boring. But the important thing to do with our dystopia is not to offend anybody, nor challenge anyone's preconceived notions about the way government and society should work. Dystopias are feel-good stories at the end of the day, and so our aesthetic is going to be the Nazis because nobody has ever done that before. But of course, if we're using that aesthetic, we have to be sure to somewhat unintentionally make them seem really cool and intimidating, rather than the senseless, irrational idiots the Nazis actually were. Of course, our dystopic government will be senseless and idiotic, but we're not going to try to portray them that way. That will happen by accident. But there's more than one way to detonate our credibility, and we're going to find all of them. So how did the Nazis or whoever actually work? I don't know, because history books are hard to read and documentaries are boring, except for the actually true ones about how aliens built ancient Egypt or something. So we're just going to wing it based off of what we remember from almost flunking world history in freshman year of high school. Criticize the government? Jail, then death. Resist arrest? Jail, then death. Owning a dog? Death, then jail, then death again. Remember, we need the audience to see how evil these guys are. They won't know the dystopia is bad if they don't also kick puppies. Drive more than half a mile a day? Put into the coal mines to work off your debt to society. Don't make out with every picture of dear leader you come across? Death, then 2-month-long torture, then jail. It's important to make our dystopia seem as self-destructive as possible. We might even open our prologue with a 73-point list on all of the major illegal acts that land you in jail or against the wall. It'll be a wonder to anybody that there is even a single person left to be put against the wall by the end of the first chapter, in which our protagonist will witness about 17 different arrests. In fact, the best feeling we can impart upon the audience is disbelief. Not disbelief in the horror of the dystopian government's actions, but disbelief that they could get into power in the first place. And how did they get into power? That is a great question, and one we are not going to answer. Real-life revolutions are complicated and make my head hurt, and reading about anything that happened before the invention of the internet is too unrelatable for me to understand. I just can't imagine a world without Subway Surfers. This is why our dystopian government will not have banned cell phones nor the internet, despite those both being incredibly useful for communication in the inevitable underground rebel organization we're going to be writing. But who will this world's version of our protagonist be? Well, Bartholomew the Brave is too powerful, as is protagonist Von Generic. Not to mention, we won't be using this map today. Having a complex fantasy world and a dystopia would be too much for the audience to handle. If they want to comprehend the brilliance of my theme, we need to set it in the real world, particularly somewhere unique in it. Somewhere nobody has ever thought to set a dystopia before. So we'll be putting it in the United States, 200 years into the future. And as we all know, the only places in the US that exist are New York and California, so we have to pick between one of those two. California, though, it's too sunny to really get across our grimdark tone, so New York it is, the city nobody has ever written about and the city nobody is tired of seeing in literally everything. But our audience won't even know that's where the story is set until we show our epic, dystopian, post-apocalyptic map of the United States. Now you can see they don't call it New York anymore, they call it Section 1. The most important thing to remember about a dystopia is that economic diversification is basically a libertarian principle, and that the most efficient way to organize your society is around making abstract sections of your empire do exactly one thing, and also be the literal only source of that one thing. There could be no possible downside to basically giving each section of the country a stranglehold over a certain type of good that could be held hostage against the rest if there were ever to be a rebellion. There would also be no possible downside to doing, for example, all of your farming in California, where there is no chance of a series of wildfires burning down literally the entire country's agricultural base. But when that does inevitably happen, it can prompt the rebellion that results in the dictator's overthrowing. Wait. We're getting way too far ahead of ourselves here. A rebellion caused by economic struggles that resulted from the direct ineptitude of the government? What kind of story do you think we're writing? No, the rebellion starts because the protagonist's parents are killed by the secret police, and she goes on the warpath, something those gosh darn evil dictators have to be afraid of, because, as we all know, a malnourished 15-year-old who weighs 100 pounds after Thanksgiving dinner is a super soldier in the making. Writing the actual protagonist to a dystopia is very easy. Our protagonist is a 15-year-old, malnourished teenage girl named Rebella Freeman. She has no education, can't read, and has really never done anything but work backbreaking shifts in the coal mines of Section 1, but who, hunts on the weekends or something. But she's basically perfect at everything that she does. How do we get her involved in the plot? I don't know, maybe there's some death game the government has them play, but I don't really care about making the protagonist interesting, because I'm in this to write cool-looking bad guys and a cool underground rebel movement more than anything else. But do you know what's even cooler than that? Today's sponsor, World Anvil. Writing is complicated. World building is complicated, especially when you're working with sci-fi, fantasy, or other speculative fiction genres. Keeping track of all the relevant information, from characters to countries to magic systems, can be tricky, and it's very easy to get very disorganized. World Anvil might just be the solution to those problems. It's got a ready-made template and format for all your writing and world building needs, making it easy to get all your information down and keep it in proper order. Need templates to keep track of character information? World Anvil's got it. Need an interactive map so you can develop the unique personality of each country, town, and village? World Anvil covers that. Need templates for magic systems? Once again, World Anvil has come prepared. Even timelines feature as something World Anvil can help you organize, and let me tell you, the histories of fantasy worlds get very detailed, and having a visual indicator to keep it all straight can be invaluable. All put together, it can really get you that wiki vibe where all your world building is part of a solid ecosystem, where you can jump from one topic to the next with ease and add to any given subtopic as needed. So, if World Anvil sounds like the answer to your writing and world building needs, check them out at worldanvil.com and use the coupon code JBAT for a 51% off discount on any yearly membership. That's worldanvil.com, which will be linked in the description below. Once again, that's code JBAT for 51% off an annual plan, and thank you for not skipping the ad. As for those bad guys, now we've got to write our badass evil enforcers. We're going to call them the Thunder Soldiers, because that's what their guns sound like when they gun down dissidents. They wear full suits of either pure black or pure white armor, whichever looks more intimidating. The armor is basically for show though, because our plucky rebels will still manage to one-shot them with pipe bombs and welding equipment kludged into firearms. We'll just say their helmets make it too hard for them to see well, even though that would just make them look even dumber. Is there any real incentive to be a Thunder Soldier? Who would willingly serve this totalitarian regime? We have two great options here. Option one is they're all volunteers. That way you don't have to feel bad about killing them en masse. If they're volunteers, though, they have to get something out of it, I guess. I mean, the real reason is that all of them are pure, unnuanced evil, but I don't know, they get like an extra 5% monthly rations to feed their families, maybe. But our other main option is to make them all conscripts. That adds to our grimdark tone. Maybe our protagonist's older brother was conscripted into the Thunder Soldiers or something. Would making your enforcers be made up of entirely conscripts make them less likely to gun down people who in all likelihood are their friends and neighbors? Of course not, because the government has this little thing called brainwashing. Something which always works and is not cliché. Would this make the Thunder Soldiers something of an object of pity, forced against their will to fight for a tyrannical regime and oppress those that they used to care about? No, of course not. You're not supposed to feel bad when our malnourished 15-year-old tears their heads off and rips out their entrails with her special powers. Well, she might not do that last one, actually. We do need to make sure the movie adaptation is only PG-13 after all. And also, we need to make sure that we can sell as many copies of this novel as possible in book promotions that go out to middle and high schoolers. But with our evil and very competent empire established, it's now time to figure out what our plucky rebellion looks like. We've got to give them a cool name, though, first. That's right, they're the Resistance. They were founded by John Rebel over 40 years ago when he had the revolutionary thought that totalitarian dictatorships, not very good. Lining people up against the wall and shooting them, kinda bad. Inconveniencing our malnourished 15-year-old protagonist, the worst crime of them all. With this never-before-seen inspiration did he rebel all over the place and spawn in a functional rebellion with no troubles whatsoever. But this story isn't about John Rebel, of course. That's why we'll throw some magic in here and have him tell a prophecy about the protagonist's coming. Because it's important the audience know that our protagonist is literally destined by God to win. It's the best thing we could do for our stakes, really. Also, a prophecy straight out of the most basic of fantasy stories could not be a better thematic fit for our otherwise post-apocalyptic sci-fi, urban, young adult romance, action, drama, insert keyword for Amazon Marketplace here, dystopian story. In fact, the only way to make the prophecy better is to make it such that not only is the rise of the malnourished 15-year-old predestined, but also that literally everybody in the Resistance is totally behind waiting for her to show up before they do anything important or take any real action against the government. Relying on a prophecy foretelling an illiterate child to unite the resistance against the tyrannical government is the most surefire way to unite a disparate rebel movement after all. And that's also because, as we all know, there's no such thing as fragmentation in groups rebelling against tyrannical overlords. The French resistance was all one big entity after all, and everybody involved in the American Revolution was on the exact same page all the way through. There hasn't been a more united revolution since Lenin took over Russia. I'd near call it one of history's most peaceful and unified events. And so shall the Resistance be. One peaceful, happy, unified movement with no infighting nor contrast in its goals whatsoever. They all have the exact same vision for what the government should look like after their violent takeover. And of course, that is to found a liberal democracy that more or less resembles the author's favorite contemporary government. There's never been a time when a violent coup has resulted in a regime no better than the previous, or even worse, after all. And so nobody should even be thinking about that possibility. We'll emphasize their unity by making sure that when the malnourished 15-year-old joins them, she can give a speech with such thunderous concepts as liberty good, dictator bad, kill dictator happy, no kill dictator not so happy. And would the rebels have any difficulty setting up democratic institutions after spending their entire lives without them, and, I reiterate, being largely functionally illiterate and uneducated? Of course not. They are good, and therefore know intrinsically how to set up the most goodestest government. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. The resistance, needs to actually win their war first. It won't be that hard, of course, nor that costly, since we need to keep all three characters in our inevitable love triangle alive until the very end, but the methods will be important. Now, as is our tradition, we will not be doing any research into how actual insurgent groups function. One watch-through of the Hunger Games will tell us everything we need to know about a well-thought-out rebellion. I mean, being an insurgent basically just consists of stealing military equipment from well-trained armed forces, finding secret places and trustworthy yet experienced people to train willing recruits to use that military equipment, finding recruits who actually want to do something about their situation rather than just complain, and managing to bring them into the fold while being sure they aren't government plants, setting up chains of logistics and supplies that can travel across hundreds if not thousands of miles undetected, despite every movement of theirs being logged by the government, finding ways to communicate securely over large distances. You know, that itself is often the key to escaping an overlord. Communication. Sometimes it has to be secret. Sometimes it has to be in those places you'd never expect it to be. What I'm saying is, founding an insurrectionist movement is really easy, and anybody could do it. Well, actually, that's not true. Nobody can do it. Not without Rebella, the malnourished 15-year-old. The nice thing about setting up the rebellion in this way is that it'll basically already exist and be in good shape by the time Rebella arrives. They'll already have established the supply lines, chains of command, the methods of clandestine recruitment. How? Does not matter. You didn't see it, so you can't complain that it doesn't make sense. You just have to trust that I had it all planned out from the very start and that their methods were foolproof. But J-Bat, if the rebellion's already been so successful, how is Rebella not going to already know about them? Don't we need her to be as clueless as the audience at first? You might ask. Your mind is in the right place. We do need the protagonist to start off as clueless and useless as possible, because the audience won't be able to relate to her otherwise. But she'll have a reason to not know, I guess, and that's because this will be a subtle dystopia. Everything we've been describing our dystopia as doing so far has been very subtle, of course, and it would not be obvious to those living within it that they are living in a system constructed to be difficult and miserable to them. It's just like that one 90s movie with the pills. But to show off just how smart our protagonist is, she'll figure out that the world she's living in is actually dystopic when she watches the guards execute someone for insubordination for the third time that week. Day. Hour. Never before will she have suspected something was wrong with the world. Well, maybe when the secret police killed her parents. I almost forgot about that detail, since a protagonist with dead parents is as natural and good for storytelling as fridging a love interest character. But yes, this will be a big revelation for her. In reality, it's just because it's the first particular execution she sees in the book, but as we all know, the backstory stuff that happens before the page count starts isn't actually real. We might as well treat this thing she'd be used to as the first time she's ever seen it. It's not like she grew up in this system after all and might be desensitized to random executions. Remember, relatability over anything else. The second the book starts, she gains the exact same style and form of empathy and thoughts about the situation as we'd expect from the audience. With that, we'll write a believable character for the ages. But I think for today, we've established how to write the best, worst possible dystopia for your next world-building project. Anyway, if this sounds like a place you want to be, we have a Discord if you want to hang out with my editor and I, and a Patreon if you're crazy enough to want to, where we post all our videos early. As we close out, I'd like to thank those patrons of ours: Sani, Isaac Parrott, Raymond Don, Sadako, Cavalier, Sazabi, Shieldmaid Fenya, and Michelle of the Knights of the Inner Circle. Vianen, Jodion Void, our Knights, and Greer, TOW, Craig, Victoria, Lauren, Noah, and Saint Sir Nicholas, our loyal squires. And remember, the best type of dystopias really are the ones you don't realize exist until they've already dug their hooks deep into you, until you've gotten comfortable, distracted by its bread and its circuses. Only then, when you're already buried too deep, might you look up and realize the kind of situation that you're in. As it were, I've been starting to think about